This will be a reaction video to a video podcast that I seen by the Geoff Wilson show on June 22nd titled, Does the Hobby Need Regulation? What? You think I'm afraid to tackle this topic? Let's do this. Hello and welcome, rookie card collecting friends. I'm really excited about today's topic. It's one that I frequently visit when I'm speaking on the rookie card.
The true Jordan rookie.
But it's something that I wanted to share because it's a podcast channel or a podcast / YouTube channel that Geoff Wilson recently started. And the video only has like 3,000 views. He doesn't have as many subscribers on this podcast channel. But I found this episode to be very, very intriguing. It really got my creative juices flowing. So I said, you know, it's one of them things where I typically, when something motivates me like that, I will typically like to listen to it and listen to it a second time and even listen to it a third time because it gets my mind going. And it's something that I've been chewing on all week. And there's a lot to digest here. And obviously, I'm going to leave you links for this video in the description down below. You can check it out in its entirety, which I highly recommend. I'm going to be sharing with you a couple of clips from that video for context. But first, let me say this. Now, I'm only speaking my opinion here, which being that it's my YouTube channel, I have the right to do, right? But I think that as a whole, especially other content creators, have been extremely critical of Geoff Wilson and the SCI teams. Now, I want you to hear me out. Don't click out just yet. Hear me out. I typically have the utmost respect for all content creators, right? I understand that it's a passion project. I understand the amount of work that it takes to create a video. I know the amount of hurtful comments that many times can just discourage you. So for me, it all flows from the principle, you know, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This is how come I literally consume a lot of YouTube content, and I can give you my word that every video I watch, I'm clicking the thumbs up. And it could be a video that I don't agree with. I'm going to give you a thumbs up. Why? Because I respect you as a content creator. And most of the time, many times, I'm leaving you a comment. I'm giving you props on creating a good video, or I'm giving you my opinion or my insight on something, only because I like to engage with other content creators, because I like other content creators to engage with me. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. All hobby related content for me gets my ultimate respect. Whether I agree with you or not, or I do agree with you. Now, here's the thing. The content that Geoff Wilson is putting out, like it or not, believe it or not, accept it or not, is getting the attention of the industry. His voice is gaining a lot of momentum within the industry. He seems to be the middleman between the hobbyist and the industry. Understand what's actually happening here. There's a handful of content creators that are the middlemen between the hobby and the industry. They have the reach to reach that upper level. And so that needs to be like carefully weighed into this entire equation of the industry going forward, of the hobby going forward. Another thing that I've been finding with Geoff Wilson, especially on his podcast, he's starting to find his voice. He's starting to get comfortable with the camera. He's starting to understand his position within the hobby, and his voice is carrying a lot of weight. And when you listen, and that's the key word there, listen to some of these podcast episodes, some of them are very insightful. Some of it is a little off the rails. But that's going to be, we have to discern what we agree with and what we don't agree with. To say that he has nothing to offer, that he can't teach me nothing, is, I think, foolish, because he has the attention of the industry. He has a lot of insight into what's going on behind the scenes. But to me, content creators taking a personal attack on him or his wife or his finances, to be honest with you, to me, it's a
bullshit. A bullshit. A bullshit. A bullshit.
So this story begins on Instagram. It's someone posted a video about having regulation within the hobby. And I want to be clear about something. When we're talking about regulation, we're not talking about government regulation, the U.S. government stepping in to regulate. No. What at least the video is discussing, and my viewpoint is, it's more of like a hobby coalition, a group of individuals, right, that have a seat at the table, that have the attention of the industry per se, and that's the kind of coalition that we're talking about. And so this story, it begins on Instagram where someone posted a video about hobby regulation, and the video got a bunch of backlash, and then the guy quickly created a second video kind of retracting or giving explanation to what he actually meant or said. But that video on Instagram triggered Teapot. Now, Teapot being a semi-intelligent individual, it really triggered Teapot, and Teapot ended up writing out this dissertation on hobby regulation and kind of what he sees and what he thinks. And he invited he wanted Geoff Wilson's opinion on this hobby regulation. A very intriguing episode. So Teapot seems to think that when speaking about regulations, there are some bigger issues that before we even get to regulation, we need to deal with three main issues. And they were the collector versus investor mentality, critical distinctions between immoral, unethical, or illegal behavior within the hobby. And there was a visceral tribalism, which I had a hard time understanding that when I had to do a little bit of homework on that one, but that typically means strong, loyal tribes who react out of instinct rather than intellect. I think that's where he was going with that. And if you listen to the video, it kind of leans to that a little bit, and it makes sense what he was saying, to be honest with you. But I wanted to share with you, I was going to share with you 4 clips, but I think I'm going to break it down to only 2 because I don't want to give too much away. I know, the collector versus investor type thing, there's some mindsets out there that the majority of the hobby sells cards to buy cards, and some people take exception to that. But I think, the key phrase there is the majority of people actually sell cards in order to buy more cards. And I know myself included, my monthly budget that comes from my job was typically about $350 to $450, depending on if I got any overtime that month or not. But I found myself struggling because, I have a YouTube premium subscription that I use for what I do. I have a StreamYard, which is a $50 monthly bill. I have my Vintage Card Prices monthly fee. I have my Canva premium user fee. And these are monthly occurring bills that were coming out of my monthly budget. And it was making a dent into my hobby budget. And so I have a lot of cards over the years that really do not fit into my PC per se. And I figured I needed to sell some cards in order to sustain my hobby. And it's always been for me a self-sustaining hobby. I don't have a 9-figure bank account on 4.2 acres. I'm a blue collar worker. And those are the types of things that I had to do in order to sustain my hobby. And so this collecting versus investing that we have, it's getting played out. We need to move on from that. And I believe the majority of people in the hobby today sell cards in order to fund cards. And if you don't, you are probably in the minority in that aspect. But also, he wanted to make the critical distinctions in that aspect. I think in the video, we're talking about things that are immoral, unethical, and illegal. But then we get into we're criticizing one another over what appears to be personal preferences. And we've got to be careful with that, because that is just causing a bunch of heartache as well. And I'm of the opinion personally that if something is not illegal, if it's not immoral or unethical, it falls under the umbrella of personal convictions. And we should not criticize each other's personal convictions. Those are our own personal, right? So we should respect that. You should respect my personal convictions, and I should respect your personal convictions. We've got to stop criticizing and beating each other up because we're not doing things the way we think that they should be done. Everybody has their own personal preference. I ran into a meme recently and it said, nobody wants to hear your opinion. They just want to hear their opinion coming out of your mouth. And that is so true of our human nature. But we have to understand that each of us carries our own personal conviction. If it's not illegal, if it's not immoral, if it's not unethical, it's a personal conviction and it's yours. Also, this whole visceral tribalism, I think I'm going to play a portion of this video. It's just too good not to. And I think let's start there. Let's go there.
So the third topic is this visceral tribalism. This is when we all, this happens to everybody. I don't care who you are. If you're on social media, even if you go to a card show sometimes, there's this sort of like, how dare you disagree with me on even one point of anything about the way that I know, not even I believe, I know this is how the hobby should be. I've been doing this a long time. And you get sort of these heightened emotional responses from these anonymous Instagram handles with no faces behind them, with no people behind them, with nobody actually willing to talk to you in the DMs, let alone have a live conversation. They just seem to exist only to spam in your comments and get upset, and put all kinds of their critical thoughts all over it is what you're doing. I think it's okay to have a tribe, right? That's actually very normal. Birds of a feather flock together. We all have friends who we have things in common with, and the hobby in that regard is no different. But some tribes, and I shared this on my own Instagram recently, some tribes just seem to only want to spend their time spamming others' comments. It's almost like, I don't know this, but it seems like they all just sort of like must have a DM chat with each other and like, hey, time to go spam this chat with the same thing over and over and over again to try to annoy this person or whatever. Or they, frankly, in my opinion, waste their time just creating crude memes that they only post out to their IG stories too, of you and other people, as though that's going to change anything. And I'm not talking about Lameme James, whose stuff is largely hilarious. It's kind of comedic relief. I'm talking about just dumb, crude things that nobody else is going to see or care about. That's what you choose to spend your time with. You have nothing better with your time to do. They just complain about everything. Some of them take an even more like pontificating approach, and they'll do 2-hour like Instagram live streams or make a YouTube video where all they do is complain about how everybody else does everything. What do you think that's going to do? Nobody else who disagrees with you is going to waste their time watching that content. And then the other people who do, it's just, you're sort of like living in this echo chamber. So from my perspective in this tribalism, space, one of the beautiful things about the hobby is there's so many different ways to participate in, almost unlimited ways to participate, from the most specific niche all the way up to very broad and diverse ones. I did that video a year and a half ago on the 27 types of collectors. That was very well received. And it was a lot of fun, and by no means comprehensive into all the different ways that you can collect. But I think it's frankly absurd, and it's almost a sign of immaturity when people lose their minds that you're not doing things by their playbook, that you're not adhering to their secret 10 commandments of the hobby. And those people just need to acknowledge, like, again, the hobby is nothing more than a smaller representation of humans, of the world that we live in. And frankly, there are much bigger problems. I just don't get it. I understand being very passionate about the hobby, but I don't understand seemingly spending every waking moment tracking what you or Ken Golden or anybody else that's deemed an influencer is doing with their time. Go do something more constructive, and focus on topics that matter more in society.
A lot to chew on there, right? I mean, Teapot really laid it on thick there. And I want you to go back and watch this video in its entirety. And I want you to listen to the entire context. Sometimes we can take like a clip like this and take things out of context, get offended by a sentence or two, and then we just blow the whole thing off. No, don't do that. Listen, go and listen to this episode, but really listen. And some of the things that are being said here, especially in this clip, I agree with, guys. I'm telling you, when I sit down and think about this thing logically, when I think about it emotionally, even spiritually, there's a lot of truth behind what he's saying here. Listen, these personal attacks that one group has over the other, it's not going to change anything. It doesn't change anything. And what we do is we create like this echo chamber. We create like this, it turns into like a clique. And it's overall, it's not healthy for the hobby. And those are the things that I'm starting to realize, and I'm starting to take concerns with, and I'm even starting to change my approach on how I present myself. I don't want to present myself standoffish, or as I'm coming off, being critical of others and that sort of thing, because it's not. I don't want to be that way. So again, as a reminder, what we're talking about here, we're talking about, does the hobby need a hobby coalition, a group of people that will help regulate the hobby? So Teapot here is saying, hey, listen, before there's hobby regulation, we got bigger issues. We got this collector versus investor thing. We've got, unclear lines of what's illegal or immoral. And we have this tribalism that's going on, and all that to the side. Let's take all that to the side. Now we're going to get it. I'm going to show you a clip where we actually start talking about hobby coalition, some of the things on that. This is very, very interesting. Hold on one second. Let me set it up.
So that brings us to back to this point of a collectors coalition, of this idea of bringing people together. I've got 3 kind of comparison points. I'm going to go through what I think is unrealistic and unfruitful, and then what might be realistic and could actually be done. But I wanted to start this one with your thoughts. Like, what's your overall reaction to this idea of a collectors coalition? It's something that we've even talked about internally over the last few years, of just at least trying to have some kind of like foundational ethics to the hobby or something. So what do you think about, what Patrick posted and any other thing you've seen about this?
Well, one of the biggest issues with starting a collectors coalition or anything of that nature is the person who forms it has to be such a widely well-regarded neutral person that nobody's immediately going to say, oh, this is BS, because that person's got some type of slanted point of view or something like that. You and I have talked previously about, should we create some type of like, not even necessarily coalition per se, but some type of organization to just help with some of the foundational principles of the hobby. And I've been nervous to do it because I'm like, there's groups of people that have strong negative opinions about me.
Yeah.
If I come out as the front person on this, there's going to be people who are like, that's bad because it's something Geoff's doing, so it's bad. And unfortunately, if you go across and you think about like all of the prominent people in the hobby, there's swaths of people that just have an opinion about that person. But that's true in any, like, there's no, anytime someone becomes known like that, there's swaths of people that don't like that. I mean, I've even heard, like, I'm amazed sometimes, like probably the guy who I think is maybe the most of the guys who are currently super active, the guy who I think is maybe kind of like the most, neutral and frankly, very like wanting to do the right thing, wanting to help people out, wanting to be a great collector experience, like a very altruistic businessman in the hobby at a high level, is Nat Turner. Yet there's still swaths of people that don't like Nat and that attack Nat and attack PSA and attack collectors and this, that, and the other. And, you know, Card Collector 2 is a guy who's like, I know, like, he couldn't be possibly nicer and possibly just sweeter and more genuine, yet there's still swaths of people that don't like Card Collector 2 for whatever reason. Dr. Beckett was the name that I had suggested. He's the one guy, maybe because he's like this, you know, greater, he's like the GOAT of the hobby, right? He's like this father figure who is obviously now retired from Beckett and has been for several years and is just considered in many ways like really the founder of the modern era of the hobby. You know, I think many consider him that. And so, you know, I maybe him, but it's like, that's like the difficult thing. It's like, who is able to actually take the lead and universally gain the respect of everybody? I don't even know if that's possible in this divided paradigm world. Maybe you can have some of the big companies come together and do it, but everyone has their opinion about the companies. Like if it's just Fanatics trying to do it, everyone's going to be like, oh, Fanatics, you know. If it's just Panini trying to do it, oh, how can you have bad quality control and be doing non-player worn, game worn patches and then tell us, you know, the foundational principles of the hobby. Like everyone's going to have that opinion. Now, maybe if Fanatics plus Panini, you know, plus Upper Deck, plus Leaf all came together and agreed to a set of things, maybe then it's tough. So that's step one for me. Like, I don't know how you get past that. I don't know how you create something that everybody universally is going to buy into, but I don't know, maybe you have ideas.
No, I think you're kind of hitting the nail on the head with the inherent challenge to this, right? That this is the biggest challenge. And already, if you go on the comments on Patrick's posts and other things, and I've seen, it's like everybody just starts chewing each other up and spitting each other out. And it goes back to this visceral tribalism thing. It's like, yeah, let's get rid of this and let's get rid of this. And then suddenly, oh yeah, and this too. And somebody's like, whoa, pump the brakes. Like, I like that. Or what's wrong with that? And it's like, well, they're going back and forth. So I think what's unrealistic is that some random group, collection of people who apparently all are going to need to be on Instagram to even know that this thing is happening, right? Never mind all these other people. Some group of 10, 100, even 1,000 people somehow coming together and forming this coalition is going to impact the behaviors and activities of an estimated 1 to 3 million people per Fanatics numbers and market research who bought or sold a sports card last year. The vast majority of people in the hobby are not on Instagram at all. Or if they are, it's for their personal things and not for sports cards. They're not in Facebook groups. They're not on blowout forums. They're not on anything to that extent. They don't even know our channel or anything on YouTube, right? They just like cards and they like buying and selling. And maybe they like breaks and maybe they've gotten into this in a new way. What could be realistic, and this is not a hobby coalition, you mentioned them, is sort of the undeniable reality that Fanatics is the mover and shaker going forward for the foreseeable future in the hobby. In terms of the ultra modern hobby experience, they're the ones who are going to be creating the bulk of the new products, have the licenses. It would be great to see them lean into this a little bit in the same way that we saw Beckett recently actually go out and look for feedback from the community. Lots of people were involved in that process of them trying to kind of save face and say, okay, what should we do with our grading scale? What else would you like to see from us? And Fanatics could certainly do that. They could pull some levers, find out who are the big quote unquote influencers, bring them in if they want to be part of it. And then also just go out and identify those other people who are just very respected longtime dealers, collectors. But it needs to be a group that represents all these different niches in the hobby, not just like only the collector, but everybody. So I think that's really important. And they could bring them together. At the same time, if you're one participating in that, I think you'd need to have a really realistic expectation and say, just because I agree with this, or even if this group of people agrees on something, doesn't mean they need to listen or are going to. Why is that? Because it's a business. It's an industry. Jeremy Lee just had a soundbite extract from one of his videos that he posted on Instagram, essentially pointing that out. It's like, look, you can be collector, hobbyist, whatever. This is an industry. It is still an industry with a hobby. It's an industry at the foundation of a hobby. Fanatics paid really good money, top dollar for these licenses to outbid the other companies, and they're continuing to put money into it. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. don't expect that just because something ruffles your collector feathers that it means it's going to change what they're doing.
Yeah, that's 100% true.
So that's the first thing. The second one is something I think that is fruitless. If somebody did say it, why I still think I can go forward with this coalition idea is using web forums and Instagram stories and Instagram chats to actually think you're going to effect change. It's just going to be an echo chamber. It's going to be some combination of echo chamber and you're tearing each other apart. People, are on social media, but they're sort of caricatures of themselves on social media. We know this. We interact with people. I've interacted with people who have criticized me or criticized you in person at card shows, and then it's a totally different experience, right? It's one thing to be a keyboard warrior, typing out, getting really angry, saying things you don't mean, or just feeling a little too free to express yourself on a particular day. That's not, social media is not where you're going to kind of generate the ideas and come together. It's where you could ultimately spread ideas worth sharing, like a TED Talk, type thing, and share them. But instead, what's reasonable, in my opinion, is however you're going to form this group, and maybe it does start in terms of recruiting, you need to be having live conversations. You need to be having like Zoom calls, cameras on. If you're physically located in the same area, maybe you spend an evening at the National just talking about things. And you got to zoom in on specific topics that everybody's passionate about and have really good representation on those things. There's a way to do that. There really are ways to do that. You could take notes, and then again, you could partner with somebody. You could come to us and go, hey, look, okay, we've sort of decided and realized after listening to Teapot talk that mystery packs are not inherently evil. Mystery packs are not bad etiquette, but there are bad mystery packs.
Sure.
There are really scammy mystery packs. So here's what we've come up with. Here's some good principles to help buyers who like mystery packs make sure they're not getting ripped off. You should have some transparency of what's included, whatever, all of these types of things. That's the way that, you could actually do something constructive. Going back to this model of just, I'm going to expect something to change and some big changes to be affected by having an hour-long Instagram live that nobody's ever going to watch is not going to do anything.
Right.
Third thing, and the last one, is I think that, I lost my notes here. Okay. So unrealistic. Trying to get certain activities, I just mentioned mystery packs and breakers and things canceled. I see this.
Mm-hmm.
I see this all the time. Like,
yeah,
cancel breaking. It's bad. It's gambling. It's degenerate. It's people are losing their shirts, whatever. Cancel repacks, cancel insert whatever thing that you don't like. You can't do it. This is a business. The only way any of these things could ever be canceled is if there was actual real regulation, like you mentioned. And I don't know about you, but I cringe. I actually cringe at the idea of regulation in the hobby. If there's anything that I could see making me jaded or just sort of setting aside at least the ultra modern hobby, it would be regulation. There's already a lot of hoops to jump through with changes to tax codes and what you can buy and sell. And, that's very complicated now with those thresholds being much lower. Regulation freaks me out. Again, I'll go back to this idea that you could just, come up with best practices, like good etiquette and what these things look like, not, throwing your voice out there and just saying, I don't like this. I don't like this. Cancel culture, rampant. Any of those things stand out to you or jog any other thoughts?
I mean, I agree. I don't think anyone actually wants regulation in the hobby. No, I mean, I think you're right there on a lot of fronts. I mean, and look, the idea, once again, the idea behind all of this is noble. Like it's the idea of like, let's make the hobby better. Let's make the hobby safer. Let's get rid of some of this scamming that goes on. Let's better educate people. Like that's all noble, but I don't know that you get there through regulation. I do think you get there through education. I do think you get there from, as you said, if repacks are a concern, which they are, I think you can get there through educating the consumer on what's a good repack versus what a different, what's a bad repack. And if you wanted to create some form of standard that, here's how, a repack should be set up in order for it to be a good repack, the way to actually get that adopted is not by having some coalition announce it. It's actually by having the top 5 or 10 repack creators
Buy into it.
And them to say it. because then it's actually coming from the people themselves. Likewise, if you want to set some rules for braking, like you can never take the card off camera, this, that, and the other, to help prevent some of the scamming, which would be positive because we do see that as a problem. Your best path is to get the 10 biggest breakers to have a meeting and to get them to draft a list of principles that they all agree to follow.
Yeah.
And then they need to be the ones to post it out. And then what you're going to see is some of the smaller breakers adopt it. Maybe you'll even see some of the platforms like Whatnot, Fanatics Live, pay attention to it. If their biggest breakers are the ones saying, here's the rules, here's what needs to happen, that's actually the approach that I could see being more successful to all of this.
Yeah.
I want to unpack this. Again, I want us to make a distinction between regulation and a hobby coalition here. There's two separate conversations here. I think Teapot, Geoff Wilson, and a lot of us, myself included, regulation is not the answer. Regulation now involves the government. And I don't think that nobody wants that. But can we perhaps be in need of a hobby coalition? That, I think, is an interesting question. Part of me says yes. Part of me says no. A big portion of me says, who the heck would lead something like that? Who would have to be like an organization, a board of directors. There would, to me, would have to be a coalition of members where you would maybe perhaps pay into like a not so much a union, but kind of like a union, a coalition where you would pay into this coalition and become a member of it. And so then issues can now be brought to the board and to the members, and then as the members collectively vote on a certain topic, and that now becomes part of a written creed, a written statement on a document where it is best practices for the hobby. But who to lead on such a drastic, insurmountable, what it seems like, Nat Turner, to me, I think it's a conflict of interest to have somebody, a CEO of such a big corporation, to be leading that. I think it's a conflict of interest, and I think he would be like more, into the high end, which is nothing wrong with that. But I think there should be like proper representation of every genre in the hobby, right? At least that's what the board should be. I think, Ryan over at Card Collector 2, great kid, kind of young, and he's about to have a baby. And I don't think really, he's trying to run a business, and he's already got his hat in a lot of different places to assign him to something like this as he's beginning a new family. I don't think he would be the guy for that. My obvious pick was the same as Geoff. Dr. James Beckett would be an ideal person who has the overall respect of everybody in the hobby, but he's retired. Why would somebody want to come out of retirement to lead up such a big project like this? So I don't know. My obvious pick would be Dr. James Beckett and or Rob Barris. There has to be like a president of this coalition, this board of directors, right? And I love Rob as my choice to lead that up, but it shouldn't be all on one person. It should be like a board of maybe 12 individuals, one from every genre, and then there should be like a membership fee, and that membership fee gives you the right to bring issues to the table. It gives you rights to vote, and then all of the decisions that are made from that coalition gets transferred into a document or a website for best practices. And that way, everybody in the hobby can go to that website to learn best practices about the hobby. Then it would be great if that coalition would take these issues that were just voted on and take them to the industry, to the card manufacturers, to the Players Association, to perhaps ask them if they can get on board with this, if there's something that they can do on their end that can perhaps meet the desires of this coalition as a whole. And that way there's participation. That way now the hobby has representation, and the hobby has now a seat at the table. So many of us, we ask for hobby regulation, that the hobby needs to be regulated, and we think that would be a good idea. But I did notice, Fanatics just released a set of guidelines that are going to be imposed upon card shop owners, and it seems like, we're taking direction. We're taking a path towards regulating the hobby when it comes to card shops and what's expected of you to meet the standard that we want you to have in order for you to get distribution. And the hobby come unglued. It's like, who are you to say how to run my business? Who do you think you are? It's like, I don't know. It's just one of them things that to me, in today's culture, it's tough, right? There's just, our society, we don't like to be told what to do, and that's problematic. It's a political issue. Some call it a political issue. I think it's more of a spiritual issue. It reveals the condition of society. It's just very, don't tell me what to do. And that's how come I had an opportunity to talk on this topic on Hobby Hotline, and Dr. James Beckett was on with Danny Black and myself, and we brought this topic up, and Dr. Beckett brought up a good point where, yeah, there should be regulation, but there should be self-regulation, right? So we should know within our own person, we each have our own personal conviction, right? And we need to develop that within ourselves and know kind of our boundaries, and also understand that, yes, there are things that are unethical. There are some things that are illegal, and we shouldn't do those. And so he kind of presented it to where it's like up to each individual person. But to me, the real answer to all of this, in what I've even talked about in fixing the rookie card, and that is education, education, education. I've said it many times here, as over the years, I really want the hobby to have a seat at the table. There's decisions that are made, practices that are done that really conflict against the hobby. And I just wish that there was an organization, a situation where the hobby can have a seat at the table and really help the Players Association and really help card manufacturers determine what the hobby's needs and wants are. I believe there's, I believe some of these folks are really disconnected with the heart of a collector, and they just have no idea. They just create things and just throw things out there that have no rhyme or reason, or situations arise, or mistakes are done, or shadiness starts to come up, and nothing is said about it. It's like the card manufacturers and the PA, they just don't communicate. They like stick their head in the sand, and they don't deal with issues. This is how come I've always felt the need for a hobby coalition to be the go in between, right? The voice of the hobby between the hobbyist and the card manufacturers, and that they communicate our concerns. We get an answer back from the hobby coalition. The hobby coalition communicates it back to the hobby. Now, some might say Dr. Beckett brought up a good point where they are doing that, but they didn't create a hobby coalition. They are using certain content creators. Geoff Wilson is one of those. He is the go-between between the hobby and the card manufacturers in the industry. So really, just eye-opening stuff going on. But what do you think? What do you think about the universal buy-in idea? I kind of, where Geoff was talking about, you take a group, the top 10 breakers, you take the top 10 card shops, and you create these certain genres, and they come up with a set of best practices. I think that's a noble idea. That's one way to do it. But let me know in the comments down below. And of course, the link to this video, please, not that these guys need any shout outs or publications, right? But I'm just recommending that if you would like to see more, I would highly recommend you watch this video in its entirety. And if you need rookie card best practices, I happen to know a guy. Why do we need rookie card best practices? Because, my friends, not all rookie cards are created equal.
And will be forever, because it is now being recognized as the true Jordan rookie from 1985.
Until next time, buenos nachos, muchachos.